Hi everybody. In this video series, I will be discussing about the concepts and formulae that are used in electrostatics for JEE Mains and Advanced. If you think electrostatics is tough for you, then do stick with me up till the end of this video series, and I can assure you that electrostatics will be much easier for you than what it currently is. Let's get started straight away with the first formula. Say for example, you have a charge Q1 and you have another charge Q2, and the distance between the two charges is equal to R. Now, if the two charges are of the same magnitude, that is if both of them are positive or if both of them are negative, then the two charges will repel each other. If one is positive and the other is negative, they will attract each other. In either case, there will be a force existing between the two charges. That force between the two charges is given by the formula F is equals to 1 upon 4 pi epsilon into Q1 into Q2 divided by R square. So that's the first formula that you need to remember in this chapter. Now you need to understand what do the terms in the formula indicate. So Q1 and Q2 were simply the magnitude of the two charges. R was the distance between them. This epsilon is what you call permittivity. So permittivity is something which is of the medium. It is a parameter which depends upon the medium that is present between the two charges, and if the medium between the two charges is air or vacuum, then instead of epsilon we use the term epsilon naught. The value of epsilon naught is 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 12. You can write the unit for epsilon naught from that formula itself. So say for example, if this was epsilon naught, take that epsilon naught on the left and take this F on the right hand side. So the unit for epsilon naught will be obtained by writing the units of the terms you have on the right hand side. Charges are written in coulomb, so the numerator will be coulomb into coulomb, that is coulomb square. This F came in the denominator, so that will give you a Newton in the denominator, and there is R square. We write distance in meters, so R square, the unit for it will be meter square. So finally the unit for epsilon naught turns out to be coulomb square per Newton meter square. If you plug in this value of epsilon naught in 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught, I said that if it is air, you use the term epsilon naught. If it is in general any other medium, you use the term epsilon. Okay, so if you plug in the value of epsilon naught over here in 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught, the value for 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught will turn out to be 9 into 10 to the power 9. And just like you evaluated the unit for this, you can evaluate the unit for 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught also. Keep that term here and take other terms on the left hand side. So that will be force into R square, that will be Newton meter square, and Q1 Q2 comes in the denominator, making it Coulomb square. So this is something about the first formula. Now since we are already learning about something called permittivity, let's go ahead with learning dielectric constant also. For any medium, we can define a term K that we say is dielectric constant for the medium. It is simply and simply epsilon by epsilon naught. Like I said, permittivity was something that depends upon the medium. So epsilon was the permittivity of the medium present between the two charges Q1 and Q2. If the medium is not air, then you can define epsilon upon epsilon naught. Epsilon naught was the permittivity of, you can say, either air or free space, vacuum. So that epsilon upon epsilon naught for the medium, that value will be called as dielectric constant of the medium. For dielectric constant, keep in mind that the value will be infinity for metals, and if it is air, then K value will be 1. How will it be 1 for air or vacuum? You can just get back to this. I said epsilon was the permittivity of medium between the two charges. If the medium is air, then in place of epsilon, you can just put epsilon naught and you can divide them, saying that K will be 1. So from whatever values you are looking over here, you can actually infer that if the conductive nature of the material is high enough, then K value will be a higher value, because for metals it is infinity. So higher the conductive nature, higher the K value, and lower the conductive nature, lower the K value. Like it became 1 for air. Okay, so that is something about the first formula, which is force. Now exactly the same thing is what I want you to see in a different way. So you can start from this diagram itself, but instead of putting Q1 and Q2 together at the very start, you can bring in only Q1. So let's just say we have Q1 at the start. Okay, before I go ahead, whatever I'm writing down on the board, it would be best if you can make a note of it in your notebook, so that at the end of this video series or at the end of this video, you have some written material with you which you can keep referring. Let's go ahead. So you have a charge Q1 with you, and that Q1 charge, every time you take a charge, that Q1 charge will create an electric field around it. So this charge Q1 has created an electric field around it, and if any other charge comes in this electric field, it will experience some force. We know that that force will be given by 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 by R square, but we want to first go in a stepwise manner. So this Q1 has created an electric field around it. We say that electric field, because of a charge Q1 at a distance of R from Q1. So there's a point somewhere out here which is at a distance of R from Q1. The electric field at a distance, at a point which is at a distance of R from Q1 will be given by 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught multiplied by Q1 upon R square. Epsilon naught assuming that the medium is air. In most of the cases I will be writing epsilon naught only because the assumption is that the medium is air or vacuum. In case if the medium is something else, you need to put an epsilon instead of epsilon naught. Okay. Now every time writing this 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught will be a little too big to write. So instead of that we will use the term K. This K is not the dielectric constant, it's just a substitution I am taking for 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught. So the electric field intensity, that is the strength of electric field, because of the charge Q1 at a point at a distance of R from Q1 is given by E is equals to K into Q1 by R. Like I said, this is strength of electric field, which in the language of science or in the language of electrostatics, you call it electric field intensity. So electric field intensity is given by the formula KQ1 by R. Now at this point, we are putting a charge Q2. If we put a charge Q2 at this point, the force experienced by Q2 is going to be 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 by R square. But check that formula very carefully. K into Q1 upon R square is actually the value of E. So I can say that the force experienced by Q2 is given by E multiplied by Q2. Now let's not call it Q2 because since we are writing a general formula, we will prefer to use the terms the way they are. So instead of Q2, let us say that the charge that I was putting over here was Q. Then the force experienced by Q will be E multiplied by Q. And E was the electric field intensity at this point because of the charge Q1. Okay, so in general, here you are learning another formula or another concept which tells you that, say for example, there is a space, and in that space there is an electric field, and the electric field intensity and in that space is capital E. If you put a charge Q in that electric field, if you put a charge Q in an electric field of intensity E, then the force experienced by the charge Q will be given by Q into E. That's the second formula you are learning. Along with this, you have also learned this formula, that because of a charge Q1, the electric field intensity at a point at a distance R is given by KQ upon R square. Okay, the charge was Q1. In general, we will say the charge is Q. So electric field intensity at a point at a distance of R from a given charge is given by KQ by R square. So these are certain formulae you have to remember. Okay. Now K over here, like I said, is 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught. And 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught, we just discussed before some time that the value for this is 9 into 10 to the power 9. Okay, let's go ahead with the next formula. We spoke about something called electric field intensity. There is something called electric potential which comes after this. Electric potential is denoted by the letter V. So if this was the charge Q1, let's call it Q in general. If this was the charge Q, then like I said, it creates an electric field around it. I want to know that what is the potential generated by Q at a point at a distance of R from the charge Q. The formula for potential is K into Q by R. not a very good way of learning things, because I'm telling you to simply memorize a formula. But just hang on for a moment, because after you learn these formulae, then the application part of it is where you need to really do a lot of brainstorming. So for now, just get yourself acquainted with these formulae. I said that the potential at a point at a distance of r from the charge q will be given by kq by r. Again, that k is 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught. So V becomes kq by r. That's your fourth formula. How to remember it? You can remember it from here only. E was kq by r square. So V will be kq by r. Just eliminate one r from the denominator and you get the formula for V. That's how I've been remembering it since I was a student. So V will be kq by r. Now comes the next thing. This thing tells you that, say for example, you took a charge q dash and you are placing the charge q dash at this point where the potential was V. Now, if you place a charge q dash at a point where the potential is V, then the potential energy of that charge is given by q dash multiplied by V. Again, I am repeating that statement. Understand that properly, okay? If I take a charge q dash and keep it at this point where the potential was V, then the potential energy of the charge q dash will simply be given by the charge it possesses, which is q dash, multiplied by the potential of that point, which is V. Now, in general, I can say that if you have a space and in a space there is some electric field, then in that electric field, if you are placing a charge q, say for example, I place a charge q in this electric field where the electric field intensity is E and the potential at this point is V, then the potential energy of the charge will be given by q into V. So let's write a general formula only. The potential of that charge will be given by q into V, and the force that this charge will experience in the electric field of intensity E will be given by q into E. So these are two important formulae that you need to keep in mind. Now, how can you apply the fifth formula? It goes something like this. See, you have always learned that charge prefers to flow from a point at high potential to a point at low potential. Why does that happen? You can check. Okay, not why does that happen, but let's just apply this potential energy formula to that thing. Say for example, I have a point here which is at a potential V1 and I have a point here which is at a potential V2. I have a charge q which I am placing at the point V1. Let us say V1 is at a higher potential than V2, or V1 is a potential higher than V2, that is the value of V1 is greater than V2. The potential energy of Q at V1 will be QV1, and the potential energy of Q, if you place the charge Q at V2, the potential energy of Q at V2 will be QV2. Everything in the world is trying to stabilize itself. That is, stabilize itself means decrease its energy. So the charge Q will also try to decrease its energy. At V1, the potential energy is Q1, and at V2, the potential energy is QV2. Because V1 is greater than V2, we say that potential energy at V1 is greater than the potential energy at V2. And because the charge Q wants to stabilize itself, it will try to move at a position where its potential energy is lesser. That means it will try to move from V1 to V2. In the process, when it moves from V1 to V2, what will be the change in its energy? You will say that the final energy is QV2, the change in potential energy will be the final energy, which is QV2, minus the initial energy, that is QV1. You can pull out the Q common, and you can say that the change in potential energy is Q into V2 minus V1, that is Q into delta V. Keep in mind, change in something is always given by final minus initial. So here also we had V2 minus V1, that is the final potential minus the initial potential, and that is why we said Q delta V. So the change in potential energy will be Q delta V. You can actually predict that this is a reduction in potential energy. So you can call it loss of potential energy, which is Q delta V. But if you realize, the loss in potential energy will be the gain in kinetic energy. So the gain in kinetic energy, now why do I say there's a gain in kinetic energy? Because the charge Q over here, if I'm putting a charge Q out here which is at rest, and by itself it tries to move towards V2, there is a movement that the charge Q acquires, and because it acquires a movement, we say that it acquires a velocity. So we say that loss of potential energy will be the gain in kinetic energy, and the gain in kinetic energy will also be Q delta V. So these are some kind of discussions which can keep happening around the fifth point. In short, what you need to understand is, if you are putting a charge Q at a point where the potential is V, the potential energy of that charge will be given by Q into V. Again, I want you to apply the same thing for two charges which are being kept close to each other. So say for example, we have a charge Q1 and we are bringing a charge Q2 at a distance of r from the charge Q1. And now I want to know what is the potential energy of the entire system. So if you want to know the potential energy of the entire system, you will again go in the stepwise manner. So potential energy of two charges is the next formula that you are learning. It is exactly the fifth formula only. Like I said, go in the stepwise manner. Before bringing the charge Q2, the potential at this point was V equal to K into Q1 by R. That K was 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught. And if I want the potential energy, if I bring a charge Q2 and keep it over here, and I need the potential energy of Q2, the potential energy of Q2 will be Q2 multiplied by V, that is Q2 into K Q1 by R. We can write it as K into Q1 Q2 divided by R. So that becomes the potential energy of Q2. You may be wondering that this is only the potential energy of Q2. Think of it in the reverse way. Think that it was Q2 available first and then you are bringing Q1. So potential energy of Q2 or Q1 will be this only. So you take either charge, their potential energy will be this. So in general, we say this is potential energy of the system. So potential energy of a system of two charges will be given by K into Q1 Q2 divided by R. And that K, like I said, is 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught. So this is something about the potential energy of two charges. I hope points up till here are clear to you. If there's any point till here that you have not understood, do rewind the video and check the things again. If yes, we'll go ahead with the next formula. One important point about the term electric field intensity E and electric potential V that you need to know is that E is a vector quantity and the electric potential is a scalar quantity. With this understanding, a lot of questions can be answered very easily. There is a relation that exists between electric field intensity and V, and that relation is this. That electric field intensity is the negative derivative of potential with respect to distance. This formula is more often used for solving some mathematical kind of questions that come based on the relation between electric field intensity and potential. They will be more or less related to derivatives and integration only. If you try to rearrange this dx can be taken on the left along with the minus sign, and then you can integrate both the sides. So after you do that, you can have v as minus of integration e dx. This is yet another way of writing the same formula. So this is a relation between E and V that you need to know. Just for solving some mathematical kind of questions that get asked on the relationship between E and V. The next concept in this video is, the next concept you need to learn is something about electric lines of force. So electric lines of force are just an imagination. Say for example, you draw a river. If you are drawing a river and you are drawing waves in that river, are those waves some physical things, some actual things existing inside the river? The answer is no. You are drawing those waves only to represent the direction of the flow of water. In a similar way, if a charge is present, a charge is going to create an electric field around it. But we will never be able to see an electric field, and because we can't see an electric field, we need to give some kind of imagination, some kind of representation for that electric field. And electric field is represented by drawing electric lines of force. So you need to study some properties about electric lines of force, and we are going through this because certain questions in JEE mains have appeared which can be answered straight away if you know these properties. There's no calculation required. It's only a theoretical question coming from the properties, and if you know the properties thoroughly, those questions can be answered very easily. So let's go ahead with the first property. The first property about electric lines of force is what I have shown over here, is exactly what I have shown over here. If it is a positive charge, electric lines of force are going to come out from a positive charge. They will be directed in the outward direction if it is a positive charge, and if it is a negative charge, electric lines of force will be coming towards the negative charge. A negative charge always attracts, a positive charge always repels. Okay, not the right terminology. Let's just put it this way, that a negative charge will take electric lines of force towards it, and a positive charge will push electric lines of force away from it. From this very point, you can infer the second point, that is, electric lines of force will start from a positive charge and they will terminate on a negative charge. See, it's like electric lines of force coming out from positive and going towards a negative. So they start from a positive and they terminate on a negative charge. Now, whenever we talk of a conductor, a conducting material like a metal, charges always exist on the surface of a metal. Inside the metal, there can never be a charge existing. Whatever charges you put on a metal will always be on the surface only. So if there are positive charges on the surface of a metal, the electric lines of force are always going to come out perpendicular to the surface. If it was a plain sheet like this, then for the sheet, the electric lines of force are going to come out like this. The electric lines of force always terminate or always start perpendicular to the surface of a metal. They will start from the surface if the metal is positively charged, and they will terminate on the metal surface if the metal surface is negatively charged. But if it is a metal surface, then the electric lines of force will be perpendicular. They will either originate or terminate, but whatever they do, they will be perpendicular to the surface of the conductor on which they terminate or originate. That's your next point. Go ahead with the fourth point. The fourth point is again a part of this point only. I said that there cannot be any electric field inside a conductor. So the fourth point in the way you talk about electric lines of force, you will say that electric lines of force can never pass through a conductor. You cannot have an electric field, electric line of force going like this. These lines of force, electric lines of force, like I said, cannot pass through a conductor. Why? The answer lies over here. The formula for electric field intensity is K into Q by R square, where that K was 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught. Now because it is a metal and not air, we will write epsilon in place of epsilon naught. If you remember, K was epsilon upon epsilon naught. So you can actually say that epsilon will be K into epsilon naught. So this term will be 1 upon 4 pi epsilon. In place of epsilon, we will write K epsilon naught. So this term K will be 1 upon 4 pi K epsilon naught. But K for a metal was infinity. So when you put that infinity in the denominator, you get 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught into infinity. That's 1 upon infinity, which is equal to 0. So you get the value of E equal to 0. So inside a metal, there is no electric field. The value of electric field inside a metal will be 0. And because electric field inside a metal is 0, electric lines of force cannot penetrate through a metal surface. So that's your next point, that is electric lines of force, like I've mentioned over here, cannot penetrate through a metal surface. You cannot have this kind of an electric line of force. Okay? Now the next point, let's put it as a question. Think over it and tell me, can two electric lines of force ever intersect each other? Say for example, this is one electric line of force and this is another electric line of force, which I am saying that they are intersecting. The theory tells you, or even common sense, if you think over it, you will realize that at any given point, the direction of electric field intensity, that is the direction of this E, is going to be given by the tangent drawn to the electric line of force at that point. So for this line of force, the direction of electric field intensity is this, at this point. Now for this electric line of force, at this point, the direction of electric field intensity will be this. So this tells you that at one point, there are two different directions of electric field intensity. That cannot happen. At one point, the electric field intensity can have one direction only, and that is why two electric lines of force can never intersect each other. So electric lines of force can never intersect each other. That is an additional property that you are learning. So let's just diagrammatically draw it like this, that this is one thing that can never happen. Now say for example, I have electric lines of force going like this. If you realize, then in this region, the the electric lines of force are highly crowded, and in a region where the electric lines of force are crowded, the electric field is said to be strong, whereas here the electric lines of force are spaced out, and that is why we say that electric field in this region is a little weaker compared to this. Okay, the next property, let's just rub out this part for now. The next property can be explained in this manner, that if electric lines of force are like this, then these kind of electric lines of force are going to represent a uniform electric field, whereas if the electric lines of force go like this, these represent a non-uniform electric field, because if you realize the electric lines of force are equally spaced everywhere, so the electric field is equally strong everywhere, and that is why we call it a uniform electric field, and this is a non-uniform electric field. So these are some properties about electric lines of force. You need to keep them in mind because, like I said, there are questions that come in JEE mains based on this concept. The next thing you have is something called Gauss theorem. So for learning the Gauss theorem, the first thing you need to know is something called electric flux. Electric flux is represented by the notation phi, and say for example we have a charge q, and that charge q is enclosed in some kind of a body like this. From a charge q, because it is a charged particle, electric lines of force are going to come out from the charge q. So they will go out like this, like this, like this. They will come out from here as well, but let's just consider this area for now. This much area on the body, let's call that area as A. Now say for example, if this is an area A, area we say is a vector quantity, and the area vector always comes out perpendicular to the surface. So if this was the area, we can say that the area vector for this surface comes out perpendicular to it, and this is what we will say is the area A bar. Now because of this charge q, at this position or in this area, you are going to have an electric field getting generated, and let us say the electric field intensity in this area is E bar, and let us say that E bar is a vector directed something like this, in such a way that the angle between A bar and E bar is theta. So we define electric flux as E bar dot A bar. And since it is E bar dot A bar, we can use the concept of dot product and say that electric flux is given by E into A into cos theta. Keep in mind what was E? It is the electric field intensity. A bar is the area through which the electric lines of force are going to come out, and cos theta, that theta is the angle between E and A. So that is called electric flux. Now comes the Gauss theorem. It states that if there is a charge q which is enclosed in a body, then from the charge q, electric lines of force are going to come out. Now the flux through the entire surface, okay, I said this was a body, right? Let's not take a body, let's just take a charge. So if you take a charge q and you draw some surface around it, that surface can be random. Just draw an imaginary surface around the charge q, but it should be a closed surface. From that surface, electric lines of force are going to come out. So the total flux through this surface will be given by q upon epsilon naught. That is what the Gauss theorem tells you. So I said the Gauss theorem tells you that if you draw an imaginary closed surface, then whatever charge that imaginary closed surface is going to enclose, that charge enclosed divided by epsilon naught will be equal to the total flux coming out of the surface. The total flux coming out of the surface can be written as E bar dot ds bar, where ds bar is a small area. Let's say this area is ds bar. So this is the area ds bar, and the flux coming through ds bar is E bar dot ds bar, and I want the total flux through the entire surface, which we can get by integrating this. So Gauss theorem is exactly this. It says that the total flux through an imaginary closed surface that you have drawn, the total flux through an imaginary closed surface that you have drawn will be always equal to q, that is the charge enclosed, by that closed surface divided by epsilon naught. We use the Gauss theorem for finding the formula of E for various shapes. I will derive it for one of the shapes, and for other shapes you can try it out by yourself, but the final E formula that you derive with the help of Gauss theorem is what you need to remember. Let's take the first shape as a simple shape, that is simply and simply a sphere. So if we take a sphere, let's just write that here. So if we are taking a sphere, and let us say that the sphere has a charge of plus q. The entire charge of plus q is uniformly distributed on the surface of the sphere. Like I have mentioned earlier also, that if it is a metal, then for a metal, the charges will be present only on the surface. In the interior of a metal, there can never be charges. If the material is a non-conducting material, then the charge can be present inside the entire material. But for a metal or for any conducting surface, the charges can be present only at the surface. So we have a charge of q which is uniformly distributed on the surface of a sphere, and I am interested in finding the electric field intensity at a point which is at a distance of r from the surface of the sphere. So what we do is we make an imaginary Gaussian surface like this. So the Gaussian surface is a sphere of radius equal to r, and now we apply the Gauss theorem. How much charge is the entire surface enclosing? The entire surface is enclosing a charge of q. So charge enclosed divided by epsilon naught will be equal to the total flux through the surface. The flux through the surface is integration of E bar dot ds bar. So that will be integration of E ds cos theta. Now theta was the angle between E vector and the area vector. So say for example, take this point. Say for example, the area ds was here. The area vector will be perpendicular to the surface. So it will come out perpendicular to the surface of the sphere, and because of a plus charge, the vector E bar will also go like this. That is, the electric line of force is going to come out perpendicular to the surface of the conductor. If you realize, E bar and ds bar are parallel to each other. The angle between them will be 0 degrees, and cos 0 will therefore be 1. At every point on the sphere, the E value will be the same. So because E value is the same at every point on the surface of the sphere, that E is constant, and E is constant, so it comes out of integration, and you are left with integration ds, and integration ds is the total surface area of the sphere, which is 4 pi r square. So integration E ds becomes E into 4 pi r square. So we get the formula for E as 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught multiplied by q upon r square. This is the same that you had learned earlier also. So the formula does not differ than that point charge, but it just coincidentally happens for this that the formula for this and a point charge becomes the same. For other shapes, the formula will be different. So you can write it as kq by r square also. Now that epsilon naught, the presence of epsilon naught brings me to an important point. So I said q upon epsilon naught, right? Epsilon naught will be the case if the medium is air. If the medium is something other than air, then the total flux as per Gauss theorem, instead of q by epsilon naught, will be given by q upon epsilon if the medium is something other than air. So over here you will have q upon k epsilon naught. So if the medium here was something other than air, it would have been q upon k epsilon naught, and because it is k epsilon naught, I would have had 4 pi k epsilon naught over here as well. So not much of a difference in that k epsilon naught formula and the k epsilon naught there also. So that's how you derive the formula for E for a sphere having a uniform charge distribution Q. Now keep in mind this was a conducting sphere. What if I ask you electric field inside? Say for example there is a point at a distance of d from the center inside the sphere. So my Gaussian surface will now be this. But to find E at this point, we will say that Q, the charge enclosed, is 0. Because the charge enclosed will be 0, integration E ds will be 0. And because integration E ds will be 0, E will again come out this 4 pi r square. Instead of 4 pi r square, you will have 4 pi d square. That 4 pi d square will go down and the E value inside will be 0. So at a point D, inside the sphere, the electric field intensity will be 0. So again we are concluding that if it is a charged metal conductor. Inside a metal, the electric field intensity will be 0. Think a little over it now. You had this formula, right? E is the derivative of x. That is the derivative of distance. So here I can say that E is the derivative of V with respect to radius r. Or you can say with respect to distance from the center, which we can call x. Like in general, distance from the center of the sphere, you take it as x. If I mark this, this would be r only, capital R, radius of the sphere. So dV by dx, E is already 0. So I can say the derivative of V will be 0. And if derivative of V will be 0, then V will be a constant. So because E inside is 0, we say that V inside will be constant. This is all for a conducting sphere, okay? So for a conducting sphere, E inside the sphere will be 0 and V inside the sphere is going to be constant because of this result. Okay, let's go ahead with the next shape. The next shape will be a sheet, an infinite sheet having a charge density. So if you take an infinite sheet, let's say it has positive charges, and the charge density means the charge per unit area for the sheet is sigma. Sigma is the charge per unit area for the sheet. And we are interested in finding the electric field intensity at a nearby point. So what we do is we again make the Gaussian surface, and the Gaussian surface this time we will make it a cylinder. So now the cylinder is this, and that is our Gaussian surface. So if we make electric lines of force, they are going to come out like this, and from the other side also they will come out like this. So now we can apply the Gauss theorem by saying that the charge enclosed by that Gaussian surface is sigma into ds. Let's call that area as ds. It's a small area, the magnitude of which is ds. So sigma was the charge per unit area. The area that the Gaussian surface has enclosed is ds. So the amount of charge that the Gaussian surface has enclosed is sigma into ds. So that is the charge enclosed divided by epsilon naught will be equal to E into ds. Now since we have taken a small area, we need not integrate. We can straight away say this will be E into ds. But carefully have a look at the diagram. A part of the flux is coming from the right, but an equal amount of flux is coming from the left. So the flux which is coming out is not really EDS, it is 2 times EDS. EDS because of this and EDS because of this. Now you can just cancel out ds and you can say that the formula for E for an infinitely long plane sheet is equal to sigma upon 2 epsilon naught, where sigma, like I said, is the surface charge density, that is charge per unit area for that infinite sheet, and epsilon naught is the permittivity of the medium around. Epsilon naught assuming that it is air. If it is not air, if it is something else, then you will put simply epsilon over here, and that epsilon can be written as k epsilon naught. The next shape for which you need to learn the formula of E is just say for example any irregularly shaped body. So if you have an irregularly shaped body, then at a point which is very close to the body, say for example a charge of plus q is uniformly distributed on the body, and assume it is a conducting body, so the charge will be only on the outer surface of the body. Had it been non-conducting, the charge would have been in the entire body, in the interior as well, but because I said it's a conducting body, charge will be only on the surface. So at a point which is very close to the body, we need the electric field intensity, and electric field intensity at this point will be given by E equal to sigma upon epsilon naught. That sigma is the surface charge density, which like in this case only it is charge per unit area only. This will be derived by the Gauss theorem only, but I am not going into the derivation for now because in this video I am more focused on covering all the formulae. So that's the third shape that you have learned, that is an irregularly shaped body. So for an irregularly shaped body, the magnitude of electric field intensity at a nearby point is given by sigma upon epsilon naught. Let's just make a note of it. So E for an irregularly shaped body That would be sigma upon epsilon naught. Go ahead with the next shape. Let's go ahead with the next shape. So this time what I want you to take is a non-conducting sphere, and because it is a non-conducting sphere, the charges will be distributed in the entire sphere. So let's say the fourth shape, which I said is a non-conducting sphere, and the charge q is distributed inside the entire sphere, because like I said, it is a non-conducting sphere. So now the entire sphere has a charge of plus q, and I want the electric field intensity at this point, which is, let's say, at a distance of small r from the center of the sphere, and the radius of the sphere is equal to capital R. Okay, so again we go ahead with the same steps. The Gaussian sphere will now be a sphere of radius small r, and apply the Gauss theorem. So you will say that the charge enclosed is the entire charge, which is q, divided by epsilon naught, will be equal to integration of E bar dot ds bar. And like you had derived it in the previous case, this will be E ds cos theta, that theta will be 0. The explanation is same that you had done in the previous case. That is for a conducting sphere. So that will be E ds cos 0. Cos 0 is 1. So this will be E ds. E comes out and integration ds will be 4 pi r square. So on the left hand side you will have E into 4 pi r square. And that gives you the formula of E at the outer point as E equal to 1 upon 4 pi r square, or 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught into q by r square. This is the same like that for a conducting sphere. So as long as the point lies outside, there is no difference in the formula for E, that is E for a conducting sphere as well as a non-conducting sphere will be the same for a point which is outside the sphere. Now for a point inside the sphere, if you remember, then for a conducting sphere, if the point was lying inside the sphere, there are no charges in the sphere, and that is why E will be equal to 0, because the enclosed charge was equal to 0. In this case, what if I take the point inside the sphere? So let's take a bigger sphere now, so that I can show that point in a clearer way. Let's take a bigger sphere. The charge q is distributed in the entire sphere, and I am taking a point over here. This is the center of the sphere. The point is at a distance of r inside the sphere, and I want the electric field intensity at this point. So we are again drawing our Gaussian sphere, and now the charge enclosed by the Gaussian sphere is not the entire charge q. Let's call the charge enclosed as q dash. So now again the Gauss theorem applied will tell us that q dash upon epsilon naught, which is the charge enclosed, divided by epsilon naught, should be integration of E bar dot ds bar. For this sphere also, the parameters are going to be like the previous one only. So E bar dot ds bar, E ds cos theta, theta will be 0, because if you consider this point, the direction of E bar, just consider it here, the area will also be here. So again you will have E bar dot ds bar as E ds cos 0, cos 0 is 1, E will be constant, comes out, and integration ds. Now integration ds means area of the Gaussian sphere, and your Gaussian sphere is this. So area of this sphere will be 4 pi small r square. So we have 4 pi into small r square, and that is why we get E as 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught into q dash upon small r square. Now our aim in this formula is to eliminate q dash and try to bring q in the formula. Because see, the question will tell us how much charge is there on the entire sphere, and they will give us the value of r. They will not tell us what is q dash. Finding q dash is our job. So how to find q dash? You can assume that the charge has been uniformly distributed. That is, the charge per unit volume is constant for the sphere. So you will say charge per unit volume is q upon 4 by 3 pi r cube for the entire sphere. And because charge per unit volume is constant, we can apply the same thing for the smaller Gaussian sphere also. The charge enclosed in the Gaussian sphere is q dash upon the volume is 4 by 3 pi. Sorry, this should be capital R cube because this was for the full sphere, and small r cube for the Gaussian sphere. Keep in mind, what I am doing is I am saying that the charge density, that is sigma, is equal to sigma for the bigger sphere, and sigma for the Gaussian sphere will be the same. So this is sigma for the bigger sphere, and this is your sigma for the Gaussian sphere. They will be the same because charge is uniformly distributed. You can just cancel out that 4 by 3 pi on both the sides, and that will finally give you q dash as q into small r cube upon capital R cube. So all you need to do is substitute that q dash here. So when you put in that q dash over here, you will have the value of Q dash as Q multiplied by small r cube upon capital R cube. And that is why this r cube and r square get cancelled, leaving you with 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught. You can write it as Q by r square into r upon r. Because if you realize, this was the electric field intensity but at the surface. Now why do I call it at the surface? Because see, in place of r you have capital R, and capital R means radius of the bigger sphere, radius of the original sphere that you had. This would be capital R. So capital R means you are at the surface. So this becomes the value of E at the surface, and that multiplied by small r upon r will give you the electric field intensity inside the sphere. So this is the formula for electric field intensity at a point inside a non-conducting sphere charged with a charge equal to Q. So that is the difference between a conducting and a non-conducting sphere. For a conducting sphere, E inside was 0, and for a non-conducting sphere, E inside will be non-zero. So let us just write down that formula in a proper way here. So for a non-conducting sphere, the E formula inside, okay, this is, I will specifically write it as E inside because E outside was the same as that conducting sphere. This is 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught, which I had mentioned I will be writing it as K only, into Q upon capital R square. R is radius of the original sphere multiplied by small r upon capital R. So this small r is the distance of the point inside the sphere from the center. So if this was the sphere and you are finding E at this point, then this value will be small r. Okay, so that's your fourth point. Go ahead with the fifth one. Say for example, I have an infinitely long rod with me and it is charged with a positive charge. There is a point P somewhere over here at a distance of r. Okay, let's just change my words. This is not an infinite rod, it is a rod of length L. And the charge on the rod is equal to Q. And let us say this angle is alpha and this angle out here is beta. And this length is r. This figure is what you need to keep in mind, because when the question comes in JEE mains, they might not give you exactly the same figure. They might twist the figure and give the question. I mean, they might twist the question in such a way that the figure form will be little tilted version of this. So now what you need to understand over here is, at the point P you are trying to find the electric field intensity E, and at the point P the angles made are alpha and beta. So alpha and beta are the angles made from P, or you can consider that point P as the vertex, and one of the ends must be, I mean, the terminal point of that angle should be end of the rod. This angle alpha is formed at the point P from one end of the rod to this point, from where you are measuring the distance of P from the rod. And like I said, the distance of P from the rod is r. Similarly, beta is the angle made at the other end. Okay, now electric field intensity at point P might be directed randomly, something like this. So there are two formulae. One is for finding this x component and the other is for finding the y component. So the x component of the electric field is obtained by this formula. The x component of the field is k lambda by r sine alpha plus sine beta, where this lambda is the charge per unit length. So lambda is actually Q by L, and the other terms are known. K is 1 upon 4 pi epsilon naught, r is the distance of P from the rod, and sine alpha and beta are the angles here. If you want to find the component Ey, the component Ey will be written in a similar way. So k lambda by r, just that the term inside will be cos alpha minus cos beta. These are formulae you need to remember. Now, okay, in your exams, the sum might come like this. They might give you a wire here, and at this point, they might expect you to compute the electric field intensity in this direction. So you need to understand that this direction is the direction parallel to the rod. And parallel to the rod, see, Ey was the one which was parallel to the rod. So for finding this component of electric field, you will use the Ey formula. Now, if this was the rod with charge, and I tell you to find this component, then this component is the one which is perpendicular to the rod. And for the component which is perpendicular to the rod, the formula that you need to use is for Ex. So this is what I need you to understand, that understand the diagram, because when a question comes, the diagram might be a little tilted or slightly different than this. So analyze the components and then go for using the formula in your questions. So that's the fifth point. And now one last shape for which you need to remember the formula of E for. Take a circular ring and that is charged. The total charge, let it be Q. From the center of the ring on the axis, okay, so I have drawn the axis of the ring. On the axis of the ring, there is a point and that point is at a distance of x. Just complete the triangle here. The vertical length out here is the radius of the ring. And finally, I want to find the electric field intensity at this point. The electric field intensity at this point, E bar or E, will be given by kqx upon x square plus r square power 3 by 2. Like I said, it's not that these formulae have just come out of thin air. These formulae do have their own derivations, but at this point of time, if you're targeting JEE, you need not really get into the derivations of them, although getting into the derivations would always be enjoyable and a better way of learning. But for the time being, if you want to get if you want to quickly just understand the formula and their applications in sums, you can just remember the formula for now, and as and when you get time you can look at the derivations yourself. So E will be this, and we will also learn the formula for potential at this point. Let's not call it point E, let's call it some point where we are finding the electric field intensity and the potential. If you want the potential at this point, then if you know E, can you find V? It's easy, because if you have a look at this formula, E was the derivative of V. So V is going to be the integration of E, and that too with respect to x, and that to the negative integration. So you can integrate this. It will be a little longer task because you will have to take the denominator as t and the numerator as x dx, that will become dt. A little bit of jugglery, a little bit of integration, and that will give you the formula of V as kq divided by root over r square plus x square. So this is it, guys. This is where I am completing the shapes for which you need to remember the formula of E for. Do have a look at all these results and all these formulae. These formulae are really important, and most of the sums in JEE mains will get solved as far as you are remembering these formula. Go through this, guys, and once you are done with this, we'll go ahead with the next part. And one last thing I want to cover in this video is something about potential on the surface of a metallic sphere, a metallic or a conducting sphere. Now I had mentioned that for a conducting sphere, the charges will remain only on the surface and there will be no charge inside the sphere. So if you're drawing a sphere and I said it is a conducting or a metallic sphere, the charges will be there only on the outer surface. And that is why I had mentioned that because there are charges only on the outer surface, if you take any point inside and draw a Gaussian sphere, the charge enclosed inside will be equal to 0, and that is why the electric field intensity inside will be equal to 0. Okay. Now I need to know the potential inside. We had also discussed that because E is equal to 0 and E was minus dV by dx, so dV by dx will be equal to 0, and because the derivative of V is equal to 0, V will be a constant. So inside a metallic sphere, V will be constant. The question is, what will be that constant value? The constant value of V inside a sphere, inside a metallic or a conducting sphere, is going to be the same which is there on the surface. And at the surface, the formula for V is given by kq by r. It is the same that you had learned for a point charge. The value of potential at a point at a distance r from a charge is kq by r. In a similar way, this will also be kq by r. Just that r over here will be the radius of the sphere. Now keep in mind, this formula is applicable only for a conducting sphere. Had it been a non-conducting sphere, the formula will change. But for the time being, we are focused on a conducting sphere. So V for a conducting sphere at the surface will be kq by r, and whatever value of V you have at the surface will be the same value inside also. So V, that is potential inside a conducting sphere, is also equal to kq by r only. Now this is where some questions come in JEE Mains. So the format of questions or the entire setup is given something like this. So there is one sphere of radius A surrounded by another sphere of radius B surrounded by another sphere of radius C. So radius of the second sphere B and radius of this sphere is equal to C. Okay, now we need to find the potential at the surface of A. At the surface of A, you will say that at the surface of A, at surface of A. So at the surface of A, the potential is going to be K into QA by RA or the radius of A. QA is the charge which is there on the sphere of radius A. Similarly, QB will be the charge on B and QC will be the charge on C. So at the surface of A, the potential is KQA by A because of the sphere A. But now consider the sphere B. The sphere B is outside the sphere A. So when you talk of surface of A, any point on the surface of A is inside the sphere B. And because of the sphere B, the potential at an interior point will be the same as that on the surface of B, which is KQB by B. So plus we will go for KQB by B. Similarly, that point is in the interior of C also. So at this point, the potential because of C will be KQC by C. So this is going to be the potential at the surface of A because of all the three spheres. Now think over it. What if I say at the surface of B? At the surface of B, you will now say that any point at the surface of B. Okay, at the surface of B, I know because of the surface, because of the sphere B, it will be KQB by B. Now QB is Q subscript B, okay? Plus, this point is in the interior of C. So that will be KQC by C. And finally, because of the sphere A, see this point on the surface of B is actually outside of A. So now the potential at this point has to be given by some other formula. Say for example, this was the sphere and I need the potential at this point, which is at a distance of R from the center of the sphere but outside the sphere. Inside it will be KQ by R only. But V at this point will be given by KQ by small r. So that is how the formula changes. So because of the sphere A, the potential at this point on the surface of B will be KQA but divided by B. Because of this it was KQ by R at this point, this sphere at this point KQ by R. So because of the sphere A at this point, it should be KQA upon B. In a similar way, if I ask you the potential at the surface of C, then you will end up telling me that any point at the surface of C is outside A, outside B and outside C. So the distance from the centers of all these spheres of any point at the surface of C will be equal to C only. So because of A, the potential will be KQA by C. Because of B, it will be KQB by C. And because of C, it will be KQC by C. So this is how you can write the potential at the surface of any of the three concentric spheres. Okay, if I ask you potential at a point which is over here at a distance of R. So because of sphere A, it will be KQA by R, but because of B and C, it will be KQB by B and KQC by C because the point R lies inside B and inside C. Had the point R been over here, or let's say if we want the potential at this point, then at this point it would be KQA by R plus KQB by R because the point is outside the second sphere also, but because it is inside the third sphere, because of the third sphere the potential here will be KQC by C only. So that is how the entire concept works, and this is the concept based on which questions have come in JEE Mains. So if you are clear with this, well and good. If not, then do rewind the video and check this concept again, and if at all any other concept, not only this, anything that I have discussed in the video is not clear, do check that concept because the things that I have discussed have come in JEE Mains, like sums from those concepts have appeared in JEE Mains. I hope whatever I have discussed in this video has been really very helpful to you and you have enjoyed the contents of this video. Do wait for the next video on electrostatics, which will be containing the theory about, which will be containing results related to capacitors and even electric dipole. So thank you for watching guys, and like I said, I hope this video was helpful for you.